Avengers Infinity War. The movie came out in 2018 and it had a wide release in April. And that was something very cool that Marvel decided to do because it was such a huge event. This is an event film. And don't let anybody fool you. It is packed full of amazing action. It is a blockbuster. So jumping right into it, the movie starts off so intense. Like, you know from the get-go, this is gonna be a movie that does not slow down one time. The film was directed by the Russo brothers, who also directed Civil War and Winter Soldier. So 2 other Captain America movies under their belt. They jump into Infinity War and they give us an epic movie. The movie has such an all-star cast. It is incredible. I could name, 10 people, and that's not everybody in this film. We have, of course, Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. We have Scarlett Johansson. We have Mark Ruffalo. We have Chris Pratt. We have, all the Guardians of the Galaxy, all the Avengers. We have Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange again. And we have Josh Brolin as the main villain, Thanos. This movie does a great job connecting all of the different MCU characters into one film, into a superhero film. Everybody had a purpose in this thing. So I would say there were cameos, but even saying there are cameos is kind of rude because everybody plays such an important role. Even the Red Skull, who plays such an important part in the film because he's there maybe for 5 minutes, but he helps Thanos get an Infinity Stone. And we, threw everybody off that we're gonna see the Red Skull again, but it made sense why I was there because of the things that happened back in the first Captain America movie. So this film is incredible and so natural for how many characters are in it. Like, it's seamless, I think this is one of the closest comic book movies that we have had in quite some time because it feels like you're reading a comic book, It's like taking an issue of Guardians of the Galaxy or the Avengers and taking each image in that comic book and making it an actual movie. Like, it's just that intense. They have that many characters throughout the entire movie. It feels like a comic book because in comic books, it's not just like one main character. You have multiple characters coming in and out of the story. And much like a comic book, this does the same thing. We have characters that play huge roles but might not be there for very long, but their roles are still very important. You'll even, if you go back into some older comic books, the editors made little notes saying why this character is important, where have you seen this character before, why is he here, and it helps keep the reader like in touch with the story, making sure they understand what's going on because there's so many characters coming in and out, and it just reminds you how complex this huge story is. It's crazy. It would be kind of funny like to see an actual movie editor going in and like making those little notes saying, where is this character before and why they're here now, blah 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 blah, what issue they were in or what movie they were in before. It's kind of just funny, but it would be funny. The movie is on such a large scale, but it is so huge that the Russo brothers knew that they had to make it personal. They had to make this a character-driven story still, because we know the movie's about Thanos getting all the Infinity Stones and wiping out half the population. That's what the plot is, but what's interesting, I think what engages so many viewers of this film is the characters and how they interact and how some of these characters who have never met before and how they interact so seamlessly and so naturally. It's amazing. Like, characters from the Guardians of the Galaxy interact with like Thor, and it made sense because Thor is now he's like a space god instead of just a god, because after Thor 3 we see Asgard now like on a spaceship, and then of course that doesn't work out for them in the long run, but seeing Thor interact with the Guardians of the Galaxy just felt right. It made sense, and even when we see other characters interact, you can tell it was written so well that this could be like if you gave any of your friends superpowers and then you put them like into a comic book, this is how they would interact. They're still regular people just with super abilities. I think that's what is so important to Marvel, is that we see regular people with abnormal powers or superpowers. And because you are so invested in these relatable characters, you're also invested in the story and the stakes behind it. It's emotional. And you wouldn't think a movie about the end of the world would be that emotional because it's an overused plot. The comedy really balances out the seriousness of the plot and makes it more tangible because you have characters that you care about and they're cracking these jokes that are pretty funny, and then they're also dealing with some pretty heavy topics, like they have the universe being wiped out. And I haven't seen like a serious Marvel movie like this in some time. Civil War was up there. This movie does that too, even like with Chris Pratt's character character, the emotional toll that he has in the film, it's real. You know, he cares about Gamora, but she's taken away by Thanos, and that really messes with him. And you know, people give Star-Lord or Chris Pratt's character such crap for what he did in the third act by waking Thanos up when he punches him or something, but like, that was such a human reaction to losing somebody. And I think it made it that much better because, again, this is a character-driven film. That's how it did so well, and that's why people still like the movie today, and that's why it has such high ratings, is because these characters each have stakes in the plot, you know? Their friends are at stake, all their livelihoods are at stake, the Avengers are no more, and they're all caught off balance by Thanos. I guess Star-Lord and Gamora's relationship is just one of the many different relationships in the film, or friendships in the film, that are so important and make this movie what it is. Like Vision and Wanda, or the Scarlet Witch, their relationship is pretty strong too, and it goes through a lot of heartbreak. And Gamora and Star-Lord's relationship can be kind of related to Vision's and Wanda's, because in both relationships, one of them has to sacrifice themselves to save the other one. And I guess the movie is kind of about sacrifice, and it's sad. The movie is really sad. So right from the beginning though, we know this movie is going to be really heavy because we see Asgard basically wiped out, we see Loki getting killed, and then we see Thor being, you know, we see the Hulk getting beaten up. Before we even see it one frame of the film, we see, you know, the title sequence, and we hear a distress signal saying, help us, you know, Asgard's under attack, all this stuff, or don't shoot, and you hear some heavy music under it, like some subtle music that's like very dark, and it gives me goosebumps, you know? And so they fit in all this craziness from the very beginning of the film, and it sets the tone and the pace for the rest of it. There's no slow point in this movie because there's so much ground to cover. And I give the Russo brothers, you know, a pat in the back or a high five for like keeping the movie well paced. And when we see Tony Stark for the first time, him and Pepper Potts are doing pretty well. And then Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, comes in saying, hey, we need you, there's an emergency. And then Tony Stark is like, oh my God, it's happening. Oh my goodness, craziness is happening. I need to do something. He takes out his cell phone to try to call Steve Rogers, but then something else happens outside. There's a circular spaceship outside that's destroying things, and there are people running away from the spaceship, this weapon. And we see Tony Stark just experiencing that moment of desperation and, oh no, something's happening, as he's walking in the opposite direction everyone else is running. And he's just helping people up. He doesn't know what to do. It seems like he might be terrified because the camera is behind him following his footsteps. And for some reason that scene, there was no music. You heard just the destruction going on around. And it made me think like, oh man, it felt like it wasn't even a typical superhero movie. It felt like it was a drama. And it felt like I was watching kind of like an end of the world film, but a realistic one, because it just felt like a natural, like a normal guy walking around, you know, trying to figure out what's going on around him, because he's a civilian too. He is going up against something so much bigger than himself. When Tony's walking the streets, it is so dark and helpless. It reminds you that the Avengers are nowhere to be seen. It's Tony Stark walking in chaos. And he has a new group of guys behind him, but not many. And it's something way over his head and makes you really wish the Avengers are still together. So the film really hits you in the heart. And of course, when we see him turn into Iron Man with his new tech, it's pretty cool, with the other guys, you know, right by his side. I'm like, all right, I want to see this fight, you know? I want to see him beat up some aliens and stuff. And it's a good fight, you know, and Spider-Man comes in. But like the build up to that fight was so dramatic, and just the build up was really nice. The suspense was really well done. Moving on, when we see Captain America for the very first time in the movie, it is so rewarding because you just miss him and everything is just so dark. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that Tony Stark and Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, they're both like abducted by the aliens, and it's on the news and everything. It's like so helpless. And then we see like a scruffy Captain America, and he helps save Vision, and it's such a rewarding scene, you know, when Vision is saved by some of the older Avengers. I'm like, sweet, remember when I first saw it in theaters, I think there were some people cheering or something, but you know. So yeah, I mean, the aliens are going after Vision for a reason, because he actually has an Infinity Stone in his head that he needs to live. So Vision's going through some crazy stuff too. You know, his life, his morality is at stake. In each film, he becomes more of an actual human, and it's heartbreaking when at the end, of course, when he's killed, you know. Going back to Tony Stark and Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, their dynamic, all three of those guys, their dynamic together is really awesome. And it was just so funny and comedic, and they had like similar characteristics, but their personalities also clash, and it's kind of fun to see it. They're three of my favorite characters in the MCU. And then when we see the Guardians of the Galaxy come into the picture with these three characters, it's even better, because I love Star-Lord, and seeing Star-Lord alongside Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Tony Stark, it's like a dream come true. And all these characters really clash with each other, and it's so entertaining to watch, because they all have the same goals, but their their means of obtaining those goals are different, and just their banter is really great, and you know, that little humor is amazing. My favorite scenes in the film were the ones with the Guardians of the Galaxy with Tony Stark and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Those are like, I think, the more interesting scenes, I think, where the more serious plot was. You know, there was a serious plot on Earth with Captain America, with Black Panther and Scarlet Witch, Vision, Black Widow, all those guys. And also we have another subplot with Thor. Thor's subplot is, it's minor, like he has a minor role in the film, but it's important, you know? He's in the film not as much as the other guys, but he's in there for a limited amount of time, but he's one of the characters that's gone through the most. And we don't need to see him that much, because his goal is pretty simple: make a new hammer, and so he can defeat Thanos. And he makes the new hammer, like the axe thing. It's rewarding when he finally makes it. You're like, all right, it's gonna be fun to see him get back into action, and then he does, and it's wild, you know? When we see him come back to Earth with this new weapon, with Rocket and with Groot, I just wanted them to play Immigrant Song so bad, but it was awesome. It was wild. So yeah, Thor, he had a smaller role, but a very serious role too. And you know, he's gone through so much. He had to see Loki get killed. He had to see the rest of Asgard being demolished, basically. Just in the previous film, in his movie, his dad died, and Asgard, the planet Asgard, or the actual land of Asgard, was destroyed. So there's just so much going on in his character. You know, this is such a Thor movie, as much as it is a Tony Stark movie, as much as it is a Doctor Strange movie, or even a Captain America movie, you know, or even a Chris Pratt, Star-Lord, Gamora movie. It's a great comic book movie, and just a great film. Like, I don't think anything like this has ever been done so well before. Now I need to talk about Thanos, the big antagonist of the film. Thanos is a morally ambiguous villain. He sets out to do good for the universe by wiping out half of the population, because he fears overpopulation. We see Thanos explain that his home planet faced overpopulation, and it was his planet's demise. We can relate that fear to problems we have here on Earth with the environment, and we do face overpopulation. So Thanos's motivation, it makes sense, but it's just morally ambiguous, and it makes you really question, is he really wrong for what he wants to do? Because he's not really a bad guy. He wants to bring balance to the universe. Of course, it is kind of wrong, because there are other ways probably to solve this, but he doesn't really see any other options. Also important to mention is Gamora's relationship with Star-Lord, and seeing their love really kind of fall apart. Not because of either of them, but because Gamora is taken away and then killed, and Star-Lord, it just tears them apart. You know, they still love each other, of course, but seeing their connection be, you know, shot in the back by Thanos is so sad, and it's one of those hard-hitting moments of the film. So now, the ending. The ending of this movie is so heart-wrenching. I love it. I love it so much. It ends on such a low point. I love it, because I'm so tired of seeing movies just always have a happy ending. That's not how life works. That is not how movies should always work. And the Russo brothers, good job. Good job. I enjoyed this film because it's a defeat. The Avengers are defeated. They are in defense mode, and they lose. Even when Thor comes back to Earth to help defeat all the enemy forces and stuff, which I gotta say, the enemy forces they're freaking terrifying. They're just like crazy creatures, and they freaked me out when I saw them on screen. So when Thor even comes back and he almost defeats Thanos himself with his new weapon, he hits Thanos in the chest, and Thanos says, "You should have aimed for the head," and then he snaps his finger, and half the population is destroyed. Completely wiped out. Of the entire universe. Wiped out. So everybody failed, besides Thanos. Nobody won. Oh, and I guess I have to mention Peter Parker dying. I can only, gosh, that made me feel sick to my stomach. Tony Stark just watching him die. Right there. I think that moment to me makes me believe this entire story is about him. It's about Tony Stark. It's about Iron Man. This universe started out with Iron Man, and we see Tony Stark at a crucial moment, and he's failed at the end of Avengers Infinity War. Tony Stark could have died, but Doctor Strange sacrificed his own life so that Tony could stay alive. And that makes you think, there's got to be a reason that Doctor Strange wanted to see Tony Stark survive. Or not really see him because he's going to be dead, but I was so sure that Tony Stark was about to die. You know, when he was facing Thanos, I was like, oh. And seeing Iron Man's suit get destroyed by Thanos slowly, and then seeing Tony Stark just fight Thanos with his bare hands, basically. That was crazy, you know? It was terrifying, you know, because usually you see Iron Man in his armor, that's his defense. Part of who Tony Stark is are the suits that he makes and all the technology he makes. And we see here all of his technology, all of his gears being destroyed so easily by Thanos, and he almost gets killed. He's defenseless against Thanos. It's terrifying. Talking about this movie so much makes me so excited for Endgame coming out here soon. So yeah. The movie ends, they're all defeated, only a handful of the Avengers are left. They're all just kind of blown away. They're like, well, some of them are literally blown away, but the guys who actually survived the snap just kind of sit there, you know, thinking, we lost. Meanwhile, Tony Stark is out and lost in the middle of the universe. So that's another issue. This is one of my favorite Marvel films to date because it is realistic as far as we see characters that we love fail. And I think it's important to see in stories. I feel for the characters in this film. I've never experienced it, I don't want to, but the Russo brothers do a good job of conveying this is a very dire situation. So again, I'm gonna give this movie a 5 out of 5. One of my favorite movies of last year. Yeah, I don't care if it's a big blockbuster movie, it did it for me. So more movies and more movie franchises especially need to take note of what Avengers Infinity War did. The movie was satisfying because it was impactful. I cared about what happened to the characters. I cared about the outcome because it was an idea that was mentioned maybe in the first Avengers movie. And it's with these characters that I've grown up with knowing, and I've watched, you know, like 20 Marvel movies leading up to just this climax of a movie, or it's leading up to it still. A lot was built up to this movie, and now I feel satisfied. But the story is not over. Endgame will be kind of like the ending of this story, but still. Moving on to Avengers Endgame, which comes out this year in 2019. I'm speculating quite a bit now. I think there's gonna be a lot of time travel involved. I think Tony Stark is gonna have some redemption in some kind of way, and so is Captain America. I hope the relationship between Tony Stark and Captain America is kind of rekindled a little bit. I know Ant-Man's gonna be a very important part of Endgame because of the whole quantum realm thing, something like that. He's gonna be able to somehow go back in time, I think, and help change the course of the MCU. He's gonna use some of that crazy technology to help the Avengers defeat Thanos. Not sure how yet, but he's going to, I think. I've also seen some set pictures, I think, of the Battle of New York from the first Avengers movie. We see Captain America in this picture, and he's wearing the suit he wore in the first Avengers, so pretty sure it's the Battle of New York. I'm sure there's gonna be even more time travel. If I remember correctly, they're wearing some kind of tech on their hand that kind of helps them time travel. Who knows? But they're only showing like the first 20 minutes of the movie for the marketing of Endgame, which is pretty crazy if you really think about it. I'm really excited for Endgame. So what do you guys think? What do you think is going to happen in Endgame, and what also is going to happen with the rest of the MCU? And let me know what some other movies are that you're looking forward to, because I'd like to know. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it as always. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Even the Red Skull, he plays such a crucial. Did I just spit on the camera?
I can't talk to light.
Lighting. The big baddie of the universe, Thanos. The big baddie.